Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to put together the doghouse SVG file from Simply Crafty SVGs. So this is what it looks like. So those are the pieces for the little dog that's included. But this is a version without the dog. I actually attached the sign with a brad and some twine. You see the top just comes off like that. So we're going to show you how to make that today. The first thing we'll do is to piece together the little dog, which is an optional component. There you go. That's what we're going to put together first. So if you want to use a different dog or something like that, there's a bunch of cutting files out there that exist already with dog files. So you do have other options. This is just the one included with the file. So when we start piecing this together, before we do it, I like to ink. I'm just using, it's not really ink, but I'm using chalk, because I use chalk a lot when I can erase it. I use mostly pebbles is what's out there these days if you do, and I use this little Fantastics. So I like to chalk the edges. And that's just because I cut the little paws, so that just highlights the little paw cuts. So after that, I'm going to just show you how to put the dog together, but we want to not ink. You can ink too. It's harder to ink when you do little cut files. You can use pens or something like that. But again, the chalk, the only reason I'm using it is I have these little Fantastics things that I use. It's easy for me to outline small pieces. So otherwise, you can also use things like chalk inks, which I use, and distress inks. So just putting my chalk away here. So I'm just making sure everything's flipped over. Had a little piece of dried glue on there. I'm also going to intermittently use the pick-me-up tool for a couple things, and that's good for small items to pick them up. Now I don't need it for this one. I'm just showing you that bottom big area. So we're going to start piecing this together. So we're going to start with the face, and you see that that's rounded at the bottom, that piece. There's a reason, so I can indicate that's the bottom. So the top is a little bit flatter. You want to center it best you can. I don't put cut marks on my piecing files. It's just something, I can do it, but I think it's simple enough to center it, and nothing has to be perfect. The things that need to sit in place, I have it shaped. That could really cause you a bit of pain. So I just forgot to, I wanted to put a little bit of chalk around this so it would highlight, because they're going to overlap. So it'll give it definition. So that's the benefit of doing things like that. And like I said, chalk is the only reason I'm using chalk on these small pieces is because I'm not confident I won't get ink everywhere, and I can erase it if I make a mistake. I'm not sure why more people don't use chalk on their things, but anyways. So right there, I know I'm a little bit out of focus, but there's a little tongue piece, and it fits. So that bottom piece is going to go behind this little bottom piece of the mouth. And I know, like I said, it's out of, here we go. So you can see it better here. I had some intermittent focusing issues for some reason on this video. I have to do a little tweak here with my camera. So you can see it just fits behind there with the round piece, and then it'll do that. And then we'll have a black piece in the back before we do that. Again, throughout this video, I'm going to have some little focusing issues. I didn't have them in the past, but I obviously changed something. But now that we have that piece, the bottom piece with the little tongue or mouth, whatever, the pink part, it's kind of more of a tongue. I'm just applying it to this black piece and making sure it's aligned. And then I didn't perfectly align it, but it's okay. But that's why you have that piece to help you place everything. And I am using art glitter glue with this little Darice fine tip applicator. And we're just going to match that up in the top. and the sides. So you just want to kind of feel around to put it in place. And then that'll fit right there. So that's why we wanted to put that top white piece on first, because we want to layer the next piece over it, the mouthpiece. So I'm just getting some foam tape. So that's just Scotch foam tape. And then just match it up. When you're using something like a foam tape that's raised, you just have to eye it and make sure it matches with the background. So that's there to help place, but you don't need to use foam tape. You could just line it up. And then now I added actually a little, you can barely tell, but a little pink glow around the nose area. Just with a little pink chalk, but it's noticeable in person, not so much on the video. Then we're going to add a dab of glue there to add the nose. And this I'm using the Pick Me Up tool. I just wanted to get it in place. So I like to move it in place before it dries. And you can see I actually changed the size a little bit of the nose, and the actual body of the entire dog is just a little bit larger, so it's a little bit easier to attach to the front of the doghouse. So I just add little 2 dots of glue. Then I'm going to place the eyes on there. And also this would be cute with little googly eyes. Of course, I have to show you how to do it with the file contents, but there's other things I thought about. As I do it, I always think of what else I could use. It would be playful, especially if you used any kind of dog, really. So now I'm just going to decide where to place them. Just be careful with how much glue, and I put it on the actual face of the dog. Just so you know why I do instead of putting it on the eyes, is because I'm liable to drop the eye if I put glue on it and get glue all over places I don't want. So done it so many times, not even funny. So now we need to just put this face on, but first we want to add the feet. So they're curved a certain way, so the ones that curve to the that curve away to the left, whatever, the curves go towards the outside, so you know which one's left or right. So you see they just fit in that back piece. And I got a little glue on the face, so be careful to keep your glue clean. And I'm using a foam tape to raise the head, because I think it gives it some dimension. So that's a Scotch foam tape, and all that information and links will be below. I do have Amazon links to most of the items. Some of the things are not available anymore, so again, my focusing issue. I know what the issue is, so I'm going to fix it in the future videos. I just didn't realize it was happening because I don't always look at the screen while I'm videotaping. I focus on my actual project. So now I'm just going to use a white gel pen. I'll have the link again. I just like to add a little accent to the eyes, however you want to do it. Everybody's different in their preference, but I like to add that little piece. Right, it's easier to add it rather than do a cut or something. So that's all ready for when we have the box done. And then here's just a quick assembly of I call it like the little paw sign that goes at the peak of the roof in the front. So just be really careful with glue. As you can see, it kind of went through a little bit. So I always have a wet paper towel on the side, and I'm just going to dab it. Just try to spread out the glue. What helps with that is just spread it out so it doesn't with maybe your finger if you want to, or you can do like a little paintbrush or something like that. So I'll put that aside as well. So now we're going to start assembling the house, but first we want to put some panels on. So there's the house pieces, and these are the panels. So that's for the back, that's for the front, and the sides. So we're going to start with putting the panels on the front and back, but before we do that, we're going ahead and folding on the score lines for the tabs and the bottom part. One thing I would mention is just make sure you get a really crisp edge on that bottom tab part, and I did refold it later in the video. So when you put this on, you're going to notice it matches up at the top and bottom, but the right and left there's a little bit of space, as well as around the door. And the reason for that is so it doesn't show through when we glue together the box. So we wanted to make sure that the panels didn't show, because I did that on earlier, and you could see if you don't center the paper exactly, then it shows as on the edges, and we don't want that to show. We just want to show, we don't want to have like little colors jutting out the edges. So you will want to match up. You could start at the top or bottom. I'd say the top, the peak's better, and try to match it up. Again, the top will match up around all sides, so you can use that to adjust it, and then you just have to make sure you center it, and then you'll see a space on the right and left where it doesn't cover that entire panel, that house panel. And just apply pressure. We're going to do that the same on the back. And again, the same thing for the door. If you're wondering why there's a gap, it's the same reason we don't want that paper to show through when you put that trim on. So we're just going to line it up. Like I said, start at the top, I think is the best. I tried from the bottom, but sometimes you can't really see where that fold is. It doesn't really align well. And you'll see that, again, the sides have a little gap as intended. And here I just want to show you a finished one, and just to show you that's why we're doing it, because you kind of can see the panels on the corner, and also we don't want it to show around that front trim. And we're not going to put those side ones on because of the curve. So we don't want to put because of the curve on the sides, we don't want to put the side panel on yet. You can try, if you have a really thin paper panel, that'll work. It's just if you put in kind of cardstock or anything, it makes it less pliable, and we have a curve there, so it's going to be hard to curve it. But I mean, you could do it. I did it on the first one. It just made it harder to put together the actual house. So my intention is to make it easier for you to put the house together and go from there. So I did forget to put the trim on these two, because you do, when at all possible, I always try to put the panels on when on a flat surface. And that's why I can't do the side ones, because obviously it's not flat. So what you can do is just add a thin line of glue on the bottom and sides, or you could actually put it on the back of the trim. Because I am who I am, you have to do it around the door too. Because the way that I work, I tend to drop things. So if you know yourself, you tend to work around your challenges, I should say. So anyways, you can do it either way though. I do put it on the trim. So we want to line those up. So we want to line up the inside edges of that door opening, and then you want to line that up to the complete edge, so it's going to hide that gap, and then it should line up and meet at the top. And then this top one, I mean, if you ink the edges, it's just for dimension, a little bit more depth. So it just lines up again. It kind of creates a little bit, like I said, a more raised feel like you would see on a real house. And I didn't put the trim at the top because, you know, the roof hides it anyway, so it was kind of pointless. So just be careful if you do it my method, not to put it too far out. Just try to stay close to the edges. But again, you can put it on the actual trim first, on the back of the trim, the glue, just a fine line. You don't want it leaking out the edges if you can. And then line it up. And the way that I'm lining it up is mostly towards the bottom and on the left and right, because I know it has to line up with the left of that house panel and the right house panel. So you kind of lightly place it where it needs to be, and then I had to get rid of a little glue. Well, fortunately, a lot of the glue was on the tab, but I'm going to line that up so it lines up so that top part meets the edge, top edge, and you can see it cleans that up. So now I can put those aside. So now I just folded these, and I'm going to curl them, and you can see how I'm curling them, because it's going to curl inwards from the sides. That's it just helps a little bit, and also I'm just creasing that bottom tab again, and you could use a bone folder if you like. I tend to use my hands. It's the cheapest and best tool for most things for me, so I know a lot of people show tools, but I don't use as many as some others, I guess. My mother always told me, or I've been taught that the best tool you have is really your hands, especially like cooking and crafting. So that the way it goes, you can see that I'm gluing that first tab. So we're lining that tab and we're going to anchor it. So we want to make sure it's aligned at the top and the side, that the side meets the tab edge. And then once we have that first one anchored, we can add glue to the remaining tabs. And then we're going to glue each tab from top to bottom. So you want to start at the top from the first one we glued, then kind of angle it around into that curve as you go down. After you do one, it's not as hard. What becomes difficult for this one is that you have to manage the rest of the box as you put the rest of them on. And the next one is a little bit of a different technique, because we're putting the flat one onto a curved section. So, but same thing that we do. So we want to anchor one, and if you feel comfortable enough, because a lot of people that are really knowledgeable or more advanced, they're going to see this and not even watch my instructions, but do what feels comfortable to you. I always speak to the person that may have never used, have done this before. Do you see I kind of flip over the tabs on the other side and continue? So I'm just going to let you watch the remainder of me putting the box together, and then I'll be back. So now we're trying to close the box. We're at the end here. So again, we're just going to kind of anchor that top one. And on this one, I added glue to all tabs. So you just kind of want to carefully match them up as you go along. You could still anchor one, but that's up to you how you want to do that. And then usually I would say, because the ones that you can put flat like that, I would press against the table to apply pressure. And I do realize on the right hand side there's one that's kind of bowing out, so I had to do a little bit. If something like that happens to you, like a piece kind of came apart, just glue the tabs again. So now I'm going to get these side panels, and I'm going to just show you how to put one on. Now these got extended because of the embossing, so they got a little bit taller. I didn't realize until later. I went and checked the size. They're fine, but if you emboss, it kind of flattened it and spread it out a little bit. So hopefully yours won't do that, but I'm going to show you what happened. But like I said, I went and double checked the size because I was like, why is this not fitting? But it did. You want to match it up at the top or the bottom. But also you can have a space on the left and right. But you want to kind of start at one side. And you can see that you have an equal amount of space around the bone, but it's curved, so you're just going to have to curve it around. So that's what I did, but I did have to trim a little bit off because of like I said, it squished it. Made it like longer, so I had to trim that off. But you do want to put a lot of pressure behind it to get it on. I'm just letting you know that as you kind of want to start from the top or the bottom and then apply pressure as you go. And so then make sure you put on the bow in the right way. So you saw me switch it around. It only fits one way. It's not symmetrical. So make sure you have it the right way when you put it on. And I'm just going to put a line of glue around the bone like I did with the other trim. I went a little bit wide, I believe, on that left side there. I wish I could fix all these focusing things after the fact, but I cannot without doing the video again. So it's going to come back in the focus again, but what I'm doing is matching it up just like I do with any piecing. You see you have the trim there now. And then here's the other side. So you can kind of curve those little side pieces if that helps you. And again, you want to either try to match them up at the top first and then line up the bottom, or I would say lining up the bottom might be easier for you, and then lining up and gluing the side pieces on. Oh, this out of focus stuff is infuriating. And for those, I went a little bit messy on the glue. For those of you to say just re-record it, it actually takes me probably this video quite a while to create. So as long as you can see parts of it, because I don't think it takes away too much, but it's not what I like to put out. So you can see I just aligned that trim on, and I do have a little wet paper towel because I did have a little glue overage. And then I put on the other side. I didn't show putting that on. It's the same process on the other side. So now we're going to put on the bottom piece, and you can attach the short piece first or the long. I'm going to opt for the long piece because it's always the hardest to glue on. And before that, I just had a second thought. I'm using chalk ink, so this is something you can't really easily buy. It's quick quotes from Scrapbook Expos where I got it long years ago, and they have booths there usually, and I have a ton of them. Actually, I have a ton of them because my friend bought a ton for me, so I use this in between. I do like my color box chalk inks better, but since I have a ton of these and they work, I use them. So I'm just doing that to hide the paper on the bottom, the edges. So when I glue this on, and I'm using Scotch Quick Dry for this. I forgot to mention that. I'm just using an applicator bottle. I'm not quite, if you're interested, you can always contact me. I have a contact. I'm still getting adjusted to this bottle, so I'm not sure if I would recommend it yet. So I'm not going to put the link of it, but it's somewhat working for me. I'm just getting adjusted. So we're going to take the long part of that bottom piece, make sure your texture's facing downwards towards the table, or towards you, I should say, in this video. And then we're going to line that edge up just below that tab fold, or on it, but try not to get over it. And then we can go ahead and just gently apply pressure. It's flat at that piece, so you can just flip it over. Got a little glue in the inside there. And then we're going to fold it over and glue it. So we'll just add glue to those 3 tabs, and we just want to make sure it's good and secure before you move on and glue them on. You could also use something like score tape or whatever your preference is to do this, because this is a process that a lot of people will use score tape and put that out and just fold it over, but I like a little give. Just try to keep your glue away from those tab edges so it doesn't leak out as much. I try to do that, but if you watch any of my videos, and I'll continue to do it, I just am a messy gluer. I try. I'm getting better. It may not seem like it if you watch newer videos, but I am getting better. I'm heavy-handed, and that doesn't go well with paper crafting. So you can just see I'm aligning the edges to all the 3 edges, and then once I have it kind of rubbed in place a little bit, I can apply pressure with my fingers or with the tool within. So just make sure you make sure those tabs are secure. Then the actual structure of the bottom piece of the box is done. We just need to add a couple little embellishments. Again, this is optional, but I'm going to show you how to add the dog. So just a little bit, I'm going to show you in a minute. A little glue on the bottom of the feet and a little bit on each ear. You don't need a lot, and you just want to place it there. See, this is what happens when you go on vacation. You come back and do a video. Something went awry. So I'm going to take the sign. On one of my boxes, I actually hung it by little brad and twine. But this one, I'm just going to figure out where I want it. You could put it sideways, or you could put, I'm going to end up doing straight across. But the way I put Fido on there, I just give you a blank panel. So the way that I put Fido on there was using a pen, and I used the Cricut maker for that one. So I used one of the Cricut writing fonts. So that was fun. Or you could do print cut too. So now we're going to move on to the roof. So before I actually used distress oxide to give this a it looks messy, but it actually does come together. I'm going to use one of these little distress tool pads, but just know that my fingers are going to get all inky, but I have more control this way. So here we want to just ink around I'm just showing you what I did. This has nothing to do whether you have to do this. You could just do it without doing it. But if you're interested in what I did, I just want to show you how I did one. And I kind of ink around the bottom part first, and then I don't need to do the top part because it's not going to be seen, but what I want to do is in between. So I'm just kind of folding apart where the cuts are and just applying a little bit with the tip of that distressed sponge. I think that's what they're called. And I'm just adding a little bit to the top. It's really not to the top. I'm trying to hit right above the cut edges, just a little bit to give it just a random distressed look, an aged look for the roof. And I was using a walnut stain color. And you can see I'm going to put away this into my little distress ink box. Use my old school cricket shirt. And when we, these are alternating. There's two different cuts. One has a solid and one's half on the side. You can see a half shingle. So we're going to alternate those. So I like to put those in two stacks, and you can see my fingers all dirty. And then we're going to, I almost forgot to ink, so I had to go get that again. I need to ink this just a little bit. I need a little bit more distress ink, or oxide I should say. And so I'm just distressing that top peak of the roof. So that'll all be ready to assemble. And so now I'm going to go clean my hands. That's what I use some of my scrap paper for too. So now that my hands are cleaned, but stained a little bit, but clean, we're going to make sure that these are stacked alternating, which they are. Actually, I'm probably going to end up doing it again because I have a bit of OCD. So first we want to go ahead and fold on the score line, so be careful around this. So we have two little tabs on each side to attach the side trim of the roof. I forget what that's really called, but you can see I'm going around and folding each of them, and make sure you have a really good crisp edge. It'll be easier to put together. If you need to use a tool like a bone folder or something like that, you can do that. Sometimes I just grab a round tool, but if you want to, I'm using my pick-me-up tool for this. Just making sure it's nice and crisp. And you could do this with any of the long tabs. It just helps to put it together better. I'm just kind of folding in those little tabs. So first we're going to glue the middle part. So as it folds, you see where the end of the tip of that is? That needs to meet up with the other side. So once that meets up, that's where you glue. There's no line needed. You just need to line it up like that. So that means you put glue on everything else. So just put a dab of glue on that corner. I'm going to show you right now. You probably could go a little bit further, but that's okay. You just kind of like fold it and see how far you can go. Then we're going to go ahead and match up that right corner there to so it matches up to the edge of the other side. So it's straight up. It's a straight line. You can see that. And we're going to do that on the other side as well. So make sure that piece is under. Same thing. We're going to glue it to right there. So we're just going to go ahead and just add a little bit of glue underneath. And you do want to take a second to hold this, depending on your glue. Make sure that that's good and sturdy before you move on to the next steps. So however your glue takes, however long, if you need it to sit for a minute, then let it sit for a minute, because you don't want it popping open while you're working on the roof. So now we're just going to add glue on the two little side tabs for one of the sides, and then we're going to line up that left edge first to the tab fold. Should match up like that, and do the same with the other tab. Then I'm just holding them. You can flip it over to apply additional pressure on those tabs. And I find it easier to put the roof together first and then add the shingles. Some people might want to do the other way, but I just didn't want to have to potentially have any. You could do that if you wanted to, but to me it's just easier visually to place the shingles. And there I go. Go ahead and apply pressure again. And then the roof is essentially ready. I mean, this is what it looks like before you put the shingles on, and it just kind of gently goes over there. So I'm just going to do a little distressing, or I should say inking of the edges of the roof. And I only show this because, you know, there's some people out there that don't use those kind of things, and sometimes adding these little things create a special touch. So, and there's people that are so much better than me as far as how they embellish boxes. I get better with practice like everybody does, but anyways, this just, since my shingles are already prepped with this color, I'm just doing the same around the edges so it has an overall, it just pulls it together. And if you're interested in any of these products, I'm trying to make sure that I include the links below. And I do use, I don't always say this, but I almost use exclusively American Crafts textured cardstock. So, I mean, with the exception of some of the patterned, but most of the solid papers, I have a variety now, so I try to use those. I do like basil too. There's a couple other product types I like. But the majority of my paper is American Crafts. So now we're going to start adding the shingles. So you can see this is what the blue house looks like already done. And I kind of raised the shingles a little bit. So I don't have any lines of how to space this, but visually you can do it. It's not a big thing. You could always pencil mark it out too, but I'm going to tell you how I do it. I didn't pencil mark it out. I'm making sure that they're in the same order. So I start with one with the solid shingle on the right and left, and then one with a half shingle, solid, and then half. So you'll see because they're offset. So there's only 4 panels on each side, and then the top peak. So we're going to go ahead, when we put this on, we want to put it just down just a little bit so the shingles go beyond the edge. Just a little bit. The technical term is smidgen. So just a smidgen. So you just want to go down a little bit. Then we're going to glue that first panel on. So I'm only going to add glue in the top part where there's no cuts, so I can manipulate the shingles if I want. Again, you want that bottom part to be just a little bit beyond the edge. And then we're just going to apply pressure, and then just make sure it's lined up left and right. And then we can flip it over to apply additional pressure. So now you can see the second panel is has a half shingle on both the left and right hand side. So you want to just kind of put it up just a little bit above. A little less above is better than more above, because what will happen at the very top is, so you just continue the same way. We just want to make sure they're alternating. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that so you can get them looking alternately. But the thing is that, also before I forget, you could make another, if you wanted more shingles, you could make more panels, just put them close together. That's up to you as well. But the other thing is if you're just using 4, and you can see now I have the solid shingles on left and right, and you see how it's going to line up. But let's say you're using, if you go too high, you may have to trim off that top piece. But if you go a little lower, then it's not a big deal if that top edge doesn't match the top. That makes sense, and the reason is because of that top piece that we're going to add, the little peak. So let's say you put them pretty close together and you were, you know, you had a little bit of a gap at the top. Mine's pretty lined up. I just got lucky. I could have pulled it down a little bit, but you see there's a little smidgen of a gap, but even if there's more, that top piece is pretty thick. So the peak will cover that gap. So don't worry about that. That's what the peak's for. So now we'll show you the remaining, the other side. It's the same process. So you can go ahead and watch that, and I'll be back. So now we just need to add the peak. So we're just going to add glue, fold it, make sure it's folded well. I'm going to get some excess glue off here. I'm just adding glue on the inside of both. And you're going to get a better view in a minute here. Well, I guess you didn't really. So we're just going to apply it to the top. Make sure that fold is flush with the top fold of the roof. And then you can go ahead and just apply pressure from within. So you can see I kind of pulled up some roof tiles here on the other one, so I think it's a good effect. So you could just be random about it and just pull up. I know you don't see it in full view, but it's just me pulling up random, just kind of offset on each layer, just to give it a more dimensional look. But whatever works for you, you can use. It looks okay flat too, so. But that's just a little extra touch in my opinion. So then we'll go ahead, before we put it on top, we're going to add the little sign at the top. So that was the last thing, was the little paw sign. So you can just add glue to that. I'll just apply a little pressure there. And then just make sure it fits well over the top. You just have to push in the front and back just to make sure they fit underneath. That's what it looks like. So for this one, the only difference is I used a brad and twine and duplicated the sign to be able to glue the twine between. And I also used the Cricut to do the Pup Shack wording. And then, of course, the one we just made. So you have a couple options, and I surely enjoyed this project and hope you did too. Thank you for watching.